One of the golden maxims of filmmaking is show, don't tell, that audiences generally prefer to see something rather than be told it. And these films, well, they definitely live up to that mantra. So let's take a look at them. As I'm Jules, this is Whatculture.com, and these are 10 movie scenes that do much without saying anything. Number 10, Rey's introduction, Star Wars The Force Awakens. Now, Star Wars isn't really a franchise that we associate with the show, don't tell principle, but The Force Awakens did a fantastic job of introducing audiences to new protagonist Rey in meaningfully wordless fashion. Her first scene in the movie goes 3 minutes without any dialogue whatsoever, instead offering up a montage of her scavenging scrap materials from the fallen Star Destroyer on our home planet of Jakku. But these 3 minutes tell us everything we need to know about Rey. She's poor and needs to scavenge to make ends meet. She's brave and resourceful by skulking around inside the Star Destroyer, and she's on her own as she has to drag the salvaged scrap around without anyone's help. Yet perhaps the most telling moment in the entire scene occurs when Rey is cleaning her scrap and looks over at an elderly woman doing the exact same thing. Nothing is said, but it's clear that Rey is desperate to avoid a fate where she's condemned to live this way forever. Say what you want about The Force Awakens being overly indebted to A New Hope, but this scene was as smartly conceived as it was narratively efficient, with no need whatsoever for dull expository dialogue. Number 9. Aragon clutches his sword around Boromir. The Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring. The Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring is an epic spectacle that never forgets the importance of small and quiet yet totally significant moments. Case in point, we have that scene on the mountain where Frodo trips over and loses the One Ring, which is then picked up by Boromir. It's clear that Boromir is being seduced by the ring's pull, and Aragon has to pipe up and tell him to return it to Frodo. Boromir snaps out of his trance and complies, and for barely a second, Peter Jackson lingers on Aragon, whose hand was clasping his sword throughout the entire interaction. It's a great little moment that confirms how distrustful Aragon is of Boromir, while also foreshadowing that Boromir will later attempt to take the ring from Frodo and pay the mortal price for it. This fleeting moment spares us the necessity for a spoken confrontation between the pair, everything with a simple act finally loosening his grip on the sword as Boromir walks away. Number 8. Brody's son mimics him, Jaws. Steven Spielberg's Jaws is both a masterful suspense thriller and an immaculate character-driven drama, the latter perhaps evidenced no better by the ingeniously straightforward dinner table scene between Brody and his son. Moments before this, we see Brody berated by the mother of shark victim Alex, who slaps and admonishes him for letting the public continue to swim on the island's beaches even after a girl was previously killed by a shark. An extremely despondent Brody is then sat around the dinner table staring at his food when his son starts to imitate his actions. Brody eventually notices and then playfully scowls at his boy. As a kid, this scene might have seemed a bit boring, but it's a really excellent example of quiet, moving character work. Brody is at arguably his lowest moment here, and his son provides him with just that lift that he needs, strengthening his resolve to take down the shark. A lesser movie would have had Brody and his wife verbally talk through his pain, but this wonderfully subtle exchange is a much better and sweeter alternative. Number 7. Magneto and Mystique laugh in the X-Jet, X2. X2 is an excellent superhero movie filled with so many great moments, though one of the most underappreciated occurs when Magneto and Mystique join forces with the X-Men to help take down William Stryker. When the devious mutants come aboard the X-Jet to help take care of business, there's a fleeting but vital moment where we see Magneto and Mystique laughing together in the corner of the jet, before the pair jokingly compliment Rogue on her new hairstyle. It's a simple but totally effective moment in quickly informing the audiences that the two mutants have a warm, long-established bond that, through the comfort and intimacy of their actions, means that we can presume has been forged over many, many years. In a mere matter of seconds, this small character beat does the job better than anything the X-Men prequels tried to do between Magneto and Mystique. Number 6. Anton checks his shoes, No Country for Old Men. The Coen brothers' Best Picture-winning masterpiece No Country for Old Men is centered around the actions of Terminator-like assassin Anton, played here by Oscar-winning Javier Bardem, who murders anyone that stands in the way of him retrieving a case of money. Now, near the end of the film, after Josh Brolin's protagonist is unexpectedly killed off, Anton pays a visit to his wife, who he had previously threatened to kill. Carla Jean returns home from her mother's funeral to find Anton waiting in her home, at which point he flips a coin to determine whether or not he will kill her. However, Carla Jean refuses to call the coin, incensing Anton. At this point, we cut to the outside of the house, with him silently leaving, but not before checking both of his boots. Though the Coens spare us seeing Carla Jean die, the simple action of him checking his boots makes it clear that he has killed her. Earlier on in the film, we see the assassin lift up his boots after killing Carson Wells to avoid getting blood on them, and evidently he's checking his boots outside again for bloodstains. It is simple, but so eerie and so effective. Number 5. Sean's Finger Gun, Mystic River. Clint Eastwood's Oscar-winning drama Mystic River ends with Jimmy killing his friend Dave after he admits to killing Jimmy's daughter, Katie. However, it turns out that the traumatized Dave was effectively coerced into giving a false confession, and Katie was actually killed by 2 young boys during a prank gone wrong. It's made clear that Jimmy and Dave's fellow childhood friend Sean, now a detective, is aware of what Jimmy has done, and in a final scene set during a parade, silently lets Jimmy know that he's not going to forget it. As the 2 men stand on opposite sides of the parade, Sean takes a look at Jimmy and points a finger gun in his direction, to which Jimmy offers a quizzical shrug. Rather than make the audience sit through a prolonged confrontation between the two that sets the stage for a future conflict, it's made perfectly clear from this interaction that the situation is far from over. Sean's going to be watching Jimmy intently from now on and may one day try to get justice for Dave. Number 4. Owen finds Abby's photograph. Let Me In. Let Me In is an unnecessary yet terrifically well executed remake of the brilliant Swedish vampire film Let the Right One In, and actually includes a few worthwhile added flourishes absent from the 2008 film. The most telling one occurs at roughly the end of the second act, in which lonely 12-year-old boy Owen learns that his friend Abby is a vampire. While looking around Abby's home, he stumbles across an old photo strip of Abby who looks exactly the same age as she is now, sat next to a young boy. The implication is evident that the boy is Abby's former companion Thomas, who grew old acting as Abby's caretaker and producer of Victims, all while she stayed the same age. Though it's never spoken, it's made clear that Owen is extremely alarmed by his discovery, recognizing that a similar fate may too await him if he continues down this path. Number 3. Daniel drags himself to town. There Will Be Blood. The totally wordless opening 15 minutes of Paul Thomas Anderson's There Will Be Blood are basically a masterfully shot film unto themselves, presenting a fascinating backstory for ambitious, doomed to greed oil man Daniel Plainview. But the most telling part of this sequence is the first 6 minutes or so, where Daniel is seen prospecting for silver and gold in New Mexico all by himself. He ends up breaking his legs after falling down a pit, but just as Daniel begins dragging himself across the craggy ground back towards civilization, we cut to him having cashed in his claim. The clear implication is that Daniel dragged himself all the way to the office on his own, perfectly encapsulating Daniel's gritty resolve, that he relies only on himself and is doggedly determined to get the job done no matter the cost. As the rest of the movie clarifies, this assessment is totally on the money. Number 2. The Ceasefire Children of Men. The masterful sci-fi thriller Children of Men revolves around a dystopian future where 18 years of infertility leaves the human race on the brink of extinction. But hopes abound in Key, the only pregnant woman on Earth who protagonist Theo attempts to get to safety at all costs. Late in the film, Key gives birth, shortly before war breaks out between the British military and immigrant rights faction, the Fishes. The Fishes eventually capture Key and her baby, though Theo infiltrates the area and rescues her. As they make their escape, the surrounding soldiers on both sides hear the cries of her baby, bringing the raging war to a brief, sudden standstill. It's a mesmerizing sight, watching dozens of gun-toting soldiers stopping in their tracks as they stare with wonder at a newborn baby, something they haven't seen in almost 20 years. Yes, technically we do hear a few of the soldiers shout and grunt throughout the scene, but it's almost entirely wordless and all the more powerful for it. The scene finally hammers home both the best and worst aspects of human nature, because as soon as Key and her baby are clear of the area, the gunfire and explosions start all over again. And number 1, SpiderMan Returns, Spider-Man No Way Home. The latest Spider-Man film isn't a movie that many expected any sort of subtlety from whatsoever. It's a shameless blast of fan service and a damn effective one at that. But surprisingly enough, its final 2-minute scene actually plays out with no dialogue whatsoever, after Peter speaks briefly to Happy Hogan, who of course has no memory of who he is, at Aunt May's grave. The rest of the film unfolds wordlessly as Peter moves into his new apartment in New York City, starts studying for his GED, and sews his own Spider-Man costume before swinging triumphantly around the city. It's a snappy, efficient summation that Peter is back resuming his crime-fighting activities as Spider-Man, and while the Sam Raimi movies would have surely concluded with an uplifting narration from Peter reminding us that he's still Spider-Man, here it's all visual storytelling with no need for extraneous voiceover.